first of all, Stephen Jenkinson, thank you very much for joining me today.
I'm pleased with the invitation. Thank you too.
So I figure we can just get right into this thing. Why waste any time? You're releasing a book in a few weeks called Matrimony, Ritual, Culture, and the Heart's Work. Would you be able to give us a little rundown of what that's about and where did it all come from for you to write this?
Well, the title is a dead giveaway as to what's inside the cover. So it's not a clever title. It's a judicious and an honest title. And it came about because through no effort of my own, I would have to say, young people, say people under about 35 or so, started to come to me in twos and fours, asking me if I would do their weddings for them. And this is a thought I'd never had, certainly an aspiration I didn't have either. And, when I tried to clarify that I'm probably not legal tender when it comes to that kind of work, and they would have to go elsewhere for the paperwork and all of that gear, but it didn't dissuade them. So the next question I would ask would be something in the order of, why me?
Mhm.
Not about me, but why are you going so far astray, if you will? Why are you going so far out of the normal circuitry of celebrants and, legal and otherwise, collared and otherwise? Why? And this is where it started to get interesting. They would use words like authentic, personal. I'm blanking on the others right now, but the notion was that that's the kind of event they were after. But the word that tended to surface like cream to the top over and over again was real. They wanted something real. So you know already that they're coming to this from some grim prior experiences, some experiences of genuine, vacuous, empty making, empty feeling events that they had seen in the past. And at the same time, and here was the part that really snagged me, they were absolutely certain that genuine, authentic, and especially real were code words for great or good or enjoyable or flawless or sort of alternative perfect, alternative magic, that sort of thing. And I had to point out to them, do you know what real means? It doesn't mean that at all. Real means the whole thing is showing up. That's what real means. It means three-dimensional and not much left out if you've really, done your work. And then I would ask him, is that what you mean? Do you want all the hairy bits coming into this thing too? And how about all of the kind of impoverished ceremonial instincts that are part and parcel of Western, or at least the dominant culture of North America? What about all that? Because understand, nobody goes to a wedding to change the world. So you're inviting people to do something that I'm going to orchestrate. You can be sure that I'm coming to change the world. That's what I'm doing. That's why I would say yes. Are you sure? Because that could be a very hairy event indeed. And some people were sure. In fact, I don't think I had anybody who said no. So at that point, we were kind of off to the races in terms of coming clean with the real expectations and the real fears and concerns. And most of the events took a year to prepare for. So I was in it up to here right away, and glad that I was. But I did not see coming the kind of adversity and kind of sideshow shit show that came along for the ride. So there it is. I mean, I didn't put shit show in the title of the book, but the nuance is kind of there, ritual, culture, and the heart's work. Yeah.
Awesome. So what makes your flavor of officiating matrimony or weddings different from how the popular paradigm presents weddings?
Right. I would say better, not different.
Better. Okay.
But that's me talking, of course. Well, in a nutshell, I took the word matrimony seriously. I did my homework on what constitutes matrimony, why we think it's a synonym for wedding when it's not, why we don't have any parallel universe or partner to matrimony called patrimony, just for example. And most emphatically, I took the invitation to bear witness very seriously indeed. And so I charged all of the people who attended with the obligation to take it all in and to be the most faithful witnesses they could conceivably be, not that day. I mean, anybody can witness them the day of. I'm talking about conceivably years down the line when the glow is off the rose, as of course it will be. And these people who, 5 years ago were delirious at the thought of each other, 5 years in, have some serious yeah buts about the whole endeavor. And they need something like a faithful reminding of what was at stake, what was up for grabs, what was in the air. And of course, what they said, especially what they said yes to. Finally, the thing I took most seriously was the difference between promise and vow. And I helped them understand the difference and practice the difference too. I think that's a fair answer to what makes it what I did worth doing.
Yeah, you go over that in your book, right? A promise is something where you're looking ahead, looking toward the future, and a vow is something that is made or consecrated in that moment.
Declared, exactly.
Declared.
It is an incarnational act, vowing. I mean, for those of people who are listening to us now, and for your purposes as well, I would say, ask yourself when the last time you used the word vow to describe what you were doing.
Couldn't tell you.
Couldn't tell you. Yeah, no doubt. And I'm not trying to bust you here. What I'm saying is it's an exceedingly rare event. It's not that we should be using the word a lot more. It's that perhaps we should be vowing a lot more than we do and stop relying on promises so much. So let me elaborate the difference that you alluded to then. Promises work in the following way. They talk about what you're going to do. Given this, except for that, hopefully this, yeah, but that. I mean, that's the nature of a promissory situation, isn't it? You're making all kinds of declarations right now, but you're also letting in the distinct possibility that the slings and arrows could shift things drastically. And you would have, as the lawyers call it, a significant material change in circumstance, right? Those are promises. Promises is, let's see what I can do. Now, can you imagine standing up there on the big day with the outfits on, everybody hanging on every word you said, you yourself not being any kind of a public speaker or a performer of any kind? You're not used to having people really attend to what you're saying word by word. So you're intimidated beyond describing, right? Beyond describing. And cold feet doesn't begin to describe accurately the throwdown you're in the midst of. And can you imagine if that's the background, the foreground is you standing there and saying, I hope I'll be up to it. I mean well. Every time somebody says, do you take so-and-so? And you say, right now, yeah. I mean, you introduce any of those qualifiers, you can feel the bottom drop out of the whole thing. See? And this is where vows come in. A vow is not about the future. There's no future implied or required in making a vow. A vow's singular work is this: I call this into being by virtue of putting it into words. I make it so, and I hold myself to it now. And if you have any doubt whether I'm overstating things a little bit, simply ask yourself the following question. As you recite or remember the vows that are typically said at the front of a room in the course of a usual, normal wedding, it probably will include some version of, do you take, do you make an oath, do you, all the verb tenses are present tenses. That's the vow at work. Not will you, do you. Here's the caveat. Here's the thing I really had to work with. If you examine the language that's used in most of the invitations that you might receive during the course of your lifetime to attend other people's weddings, usually you will find the words celebration of love somewhere in there. Okay? So you might think to yourself, yeah, what's so? Like, of course you'd expect to see it. Yeah, well, here's what the so is. If that's what you lead with, then these are not ceremonial events. They're not rituals. What they are is stamps of approval on something that already exists. And the already exists part is how these two people feel about each other. And the rest of you are just called in to say, yep, looks like it to me. Sort of carry on, that sort of stuff. And then then you get 15 minutes of ceremony and 4 hours of drunken, wildness thereafter. Something like that. And people can't wait to get the ceremony over with, to get to to get to what exactly? To get the heat off, to turn down the volume, to turn down the intensity, to turn it into a generic high five. Basically,
yeah.
That's it. A kind of generic high five to peak experience. See? So I'm suggesting to you the reason it needs to be ritualized is to acknowledge the fact that when you're involved in vows and oaths and betrothals, these are all words that come from the same era and the same understanding of life. You're in a circumstance that's trying to call something into being. You are literally in alchemy territory now. The Bible says, and the two shall become one, that kind of allegation. Well, how does that happen? Does it just, people pinky swear with each other? They just really, really like each other? Is that it? I mean, that doesn't do anything that, frankly, that lasts. And sometimes it shouldn't last. So my principal take on it was to see if we could find a way of speaking that chanced it, that brought the world into the ceremony, brought the dead ancestors into the ceremony, brought the world not yet happened into the ceremony, just for starters. So you can see why it took a year to prepare.
That's powerful stuff.
Yes, sir.
Could you give us an example of vows that you wrote?
Well, yeah, you could imagine that I was doing the crafting of this, but I wasn't actually. Okay, so the preparation is not to nail down all the details. The preparation is to literally outfit the event. That means to procure, to conjure and create and and co-author the various accoutrements of a real working matrimonial event. So all the gear. That's a big part of it.
But the people still write their vows, like the bride and the groom still write their own vows.
Well, here's not actually.
Okay.
I mean, it's not that they didn't. It's that something else happened. Not to replace it, but to put it in its proper scale and context. And this is what it was. You know how typically people will bring the gift to the day of, to the event itself, whether it be money in an envelope or whether it be a toaster or, whatever the frig it is. And the notion is that it's somewhere along the proceedings, you just kind of line up and hand this stuff over to these people, and they start off a new life, grimly provisioned by IKEA or wherever the gear comes from.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did I do? I asked myself ancestrally, from whence comes the notion of gift giving? Simple question. Instead of taking it for granted that this is the way it's always been, I wondered I think it's been otherwise until fairly recently. And the otherwise that I came up with was this. These gifts that people brought were not for the bride and groom. They were for each other. What do you mean? This is going to take me a few minutes to elaborate for you, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, think of the seating arrangement. Currently, depending on the circumstance and the age of the people in question, but typically there's an aisle. There's a place where nobody's sitting, and it runs up the middle of the joint and heads to the front of the room. So it's an arrangement that's very spectacle or performance friendly. Nothing wrong with that if that's what you're doing. If it's a theatrical piece that you're putting on, then this is theater seating at its best. Like I said, nothing wrong with it. But if you're doing a ritual, the first order of business is this. There's no audience. There's no spectators in a ritual. There are only participants. That was the kind of beacon that got lit for me early on. And then I just did everything I could to try to translate what that meant. And what it came to mean is I preserved the aisle, but I didn't have everybody facing the same direction. What I had was the family of one seated opposite the family of the other, and the friends of one seated opposite the friends of the other, facing each other with the aisle down the middle of the room. You see? Yeah. And where was the center of it? The center of it was not at the front of the room where the people in rented tuxes stand. The center of the whole proceeding was literally in the middle of that aisle with everyone facing everyone else. That was kind of, in a sense, no man's land. That was the place where remember the gifts? This is the place where the gifts appear.
Oh.
And what's happening is one side is petitioning the other side to part with that young person from among them to join the other side.
Wow.
In life, in matrimony, and so forth. Okay. And the petition was accompanied by two things: the gifts, which was a tangible acknowledgement that you were asking something very significant from the other side, and the words to carry the understanding. So this is my long-winded way of telling you, yes, the bride and the groom spoke eventually at the end. And for several hours, depending on the size of the crowd, of course, and other things, for several hours at least, all the people that thought they were coming for 15 minutes of solemnity and 4 hours of merriment began to realize that they were I was going to say show. It's probably not the right word, but they were the place where it happened. They were going to carry this. And so in the morning of, basically orchestrated everybody's understanding of how this was going to go. And then come the early afternoon, you just press go. And God help us all. And you're off to the races now, and you don't know who's going to say what about what. And you could have ex-spouses there, and you could have former in-laws there, and people with a lot to say. And very often that's exactly what did happen. And it was a kind of marvel, I have to say. And it was real in every sense that word can be meant. It was real.
Yeah. Now I understand much better by what you mean by real.
Yeah.
And it might not all be butterflies and rainbows.
No, very little
and
of it.
kumbaya.
Very little. I mean, it's not the opposite of that. It's the rest. That's the best understanding. It's the rest of what's normally, think of this. In my jurisdiction, and in many jurisdictions in the West, and maybe still this is true, I don't know, there was a legal requirement that fell upon the celebrant at some point in the proceedings to say, and you'll recognize the line immediately, if there's anyone here who knows any reason why this should not proceed, speak now, or the famous line, forever hold your peace. Everybody knows that line. And to the extent that it's ever said today, it's said tongue in cheek, isn't it?
Yeah.
People chuckle, don't they? There's this kind of fake awkwardness about it, where nobody's really waiting for anybody to say anything. Or maybe there's a class clown or a practical joker who makes some crack from the back of the room. And, but it's all in the same spirit that the whole thing is fake. That whole moment is a staged, theatrical conceit. It ain't real. I made it real.
That's amazing, Stephen.
Cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
And worthy of a book, I tell you.
Yeah. See, I've been to a few weddings in my life, and I get that same feeling of there's just something not real about this. I can sense the fakery. I can sense the theatrics. And I never even thought of what the antidote would be. But it seems like your book and your ponderings have brought you to a sort of antidote to the fakery of the whole false foundation of marriage that we seem to have built over the years.
Yeah. I would hesitate on the harshness of the word fakery. I know I used it too. And sometimes there's an element of that. But the word I'd prefer to use to describe what people were up against, and I was up against with them, is poverty. Not just ritual poverty, ceremonial poverty, but a kind of ceremonial illiteracy. Nobody knows what this is for.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they know what a wedding is, but nobody knows why any of this stuff happens. There's no historical, ancestral, or traditional tuition available to us. So we sleepwalk through this shit. And, more often than not, we're dressed in somebody else's clothes, bad rayon and all the rest. And you're trying to feel, quote, like yourself, right? So you take as much of the deal away from the celebrant as you can. You turn it into autobiography as if this is any better. And you start talking really casually to take out the kind of arch, kind of formal quality, as if formality is your enemy, when in fact formality has always been there ancestrally to rescue you from your autobiography. That's what it's for. It's mercy, you see. It's mercy. It's not intrusion.
Wow, I like that a lot. Yeah. So did you study ancient rites? Did you study the ceremonies of ancient peoples and ancient cultures, or was this more of like an intuitive thing?
Yep.
Intuitive?
No, both of them. I
Both.
mean,
Okay.
the truth is that there's not a lot to study.
Yeah.
Because why? Well, because in the days when people knew what they were doing, nobody thought to write it down for posterity's sake, because probably nobody saw it heading up over the rise, disappearing over the horizon, never to be seen again. Nobody pictured that, probably. But between episodes of mass migration and all kinds of historical trauma, colonial and otherwise, all of these things basically had a tremendous consequence for our understanding, first of culture, then of community or village, then of family, and finally of self. The damage accrued to all of those things, you see. And so it's not surprising that when contemporary people try to make a go of it, there's a kind of tyranny of perfection that they try to emulate. Some notion of what a matrimonial ritual is, never having seen it.
Mm.
I hadn't seen it either. But what I had done is seen enough DOA events. You follow me?
Yeah.
Dead on arrival events.
Mm-hmm.
Events that were so stillborn, so tragic, in the sense that all these people brought together, all this anticipation, all this good intention, all this well-meaning stuff, all the money. And what you got in the end of it is something that puts a hole in your life that you'll never be able to fill.
Mm.
That you just sat through it. You just kind of endured it. And then, God help us, the speeches,
Yeah.
which are so rote, aren't they? And people looking at pieces of paper and friggin' serviettes and stuff that they wrote stuff on, and as if to say the only legitimate expression in this moment is a rehearsed, quote unquote, flawless recitation of what I thought earlier today or yesterday sounded like a good idea. But it doesn't come from what just happened, does it? Very little of what people have to say in that formal context comes from what just happened. But I'm suggesting to you that mostly intuitively, I heard the absence of all this.
Mm.
I had a sense of the shape that the goneness of all these things left behind it when it disappeared. Or another way I could describe it to you is, you're familiar with the term shard?
Mm.
Pieces of broken pottery, let's say, are broken.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
a shard. So the few things that we do know about aisles and walking and who gives this person to, all of that, and the rings and the confetti and all of those are shards. Nobody knows what the original glass bowl or jar looked like. We got pieces. But if you're willing and you're tremendously patient, as I was in the early going, you start to clean them off and you see if there's any way in which even two of them once fit together side by side. And if they did, or if you assemble them enough in 2 dimensions, the third dimension of them begins to suggest itself. And then you begin to intuit from that the shape, the color, the size, and from that the function and the purpose and the reasons for the design. And from that, and see, now you're kind of off to the races. And that's basically what I did.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. No, I'm exceedingly proud of the endeavor. We haven't talked about the dark side yet, and we may get to it still. But I would have to say that that from a standing start, a lot of the people who came to me for this didn't blink. They really stayed with it. I'll tell you a story of something that actually happened. It gives you a real taste for the very beginnings. So these people have come to me, petitioned me in the way I told you earlier on in the interview. And I said to them, okay, here's the first thing we do. There's a thing that people now call the wedding party. Okay. Get your people together. However many, doesn't matter to me. The more, the better. And assemble them at this place and time. What I'll do is I'll appear at the meeting and I'll tell everyone basically what they're in for in terms of participating in this year-long preparation. Okay? They said, great, because we couldn't describe it anyway, so it's better it come from you. Oh, I said, definitely it's better if it comes from me. So the day comes, a lot of urban hipsters in this meeting place in Toronto. They're a little dismayed when I walk in the room because they're expecting something a little funkier, a little more exotic, a little more cafe au lait than I am. But this is what they got. You know, I looked a lot like them. That was kind of a drag. But anyway, they got over it. I took maybe 10 minutes. I mean, I've spoken to you longer than I spoke to them. And I told them as much as I could squeeze in about 10 minutes, 15 at the most. And then I stopped. I said, now, if I told you any more, it wouldn't be fair. And here's why. Because I'm going to ask you right now to declare yourself as to whether you're in or whether you're out. Are you with us? With what little you know about what it means to say yes. That's true, and it's not fair, but this is the way it is right now. Because if I told you more, it would be really unfair then. Because some of you would leave anyway later, no matter what I said, no matter what we did. And it's better you leave now. No hard feelings, no time in, no sense of a wasted moment, none of that stuff. Okay, no regrets. Just, if you wouldn't mind, think well of us every once in a while, as we'll think well of you as you head out the door. Man, the shock in that room. I mean, it stilled the atoms in that room. And then people started to stand up. And wordlessly, they walked out the door. Not all of them, not most of them, but maybe a third. Now, bear in mind, these are people's friends. They're close colleagues. They're office wives and husbands. You know what I mean? They're all of that stuff. The close confidants. That's who was in the room. And a third of them booked it and left. And the door closed and nobody said a word. And then the most well-intended person in there got up and started to move the chairs around so the empty chairs wouldn't be so obvious. So the hurt would be dispelled. And I stopped them and asked them to sit down. I said, listen to me. You've declared yourself as in. It's starting. It's already started. We've already begun. And the beginning is the feeling of you watching people you thought you knew walk away from this thing that you want as much as anything. Don't forget that, because it's not going to be easy. There are reasons for the 15-minute wedding with no preparation, no hours, never mind year long, no hours long, nothing. A little rehearsal so you can hit the mark. And you'll need this as a memory. So that's the kind of poverty I'm talking about. But poverty doesn't mean nothing. It means a certain kind of goneness and a rumor that once it was otherwise. And that it might be able to be otherwise again.
Yeah, I like that. Poverty also shows us potential, right?
Possibly.
The opportunity is there.
It's uphill.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let's not fool around. I can tell you, because I did it. If people wanted it to be otherwise, and I offered them a legitimate alternative to the standard thing, dude, you can't imagine the shit show and the pushback that came. It's almost hard to credit it, how fierce and how frequent it was. And that's when I came with the thought or the phrase, no one comes to a wedding to change the world.
But you do.
Yes, sir. I did. Yes.
Yeah. They couldn't handle the realness, I guess.
Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, people thought they knew what a wedding was, having been to those 15-minute affairs.
Mm.
You know, I don't say this with any accusation, but they genuinely thought they would know what a wedding was if they saw it. So, I mean, true story now. I got a million of these kind of vignette stories I could tell you. But here's another one that gives you a real feel for what we were up against. This is in the course of the ceremony now, okay? One of the betrothed people's mothers slid up to me during the course of the proceedings and all but hissed at me as follows. Is this a real wedding? There. She used the word too, you see.
Mm.
And she wasn't asking me like it was a question.
Yeah.
She was saying it like it was an accusation.
What'd you say?
What did I say? I'm not proud of what I said. I mean, it was pretty adroit, but still, I could have handled it differently. But man, I was up against it. Don't forget, I was like an army of one, wasn't I?
Mm.
Make all this happen, right? I said to her, are you a real mother?
Wow. I think that's the perfect response, though.
Well, like I said, I'm not proud of it. It was not a great moment for anybody.
Yeah.
But you know what I was saying to her there, and I could have found a more delicate way of saying it. But I was saying to her, is this what a mother does in a moment like this?
Yeah.
Is this mothering to you? Because if it isn't, why would you say it? And if it is, what are you protecting your daughter against? Why do I look so threatening and kind of grotesque to you? And you've never gone to the front of the room when there's an official celebrant there and looked out in the crowd and said, I just want to know, is this a real wedding? You've never said it. Wouldn't even have crossed your mind to say it. And right now, you should answer the question to yourself, why you've never thought it then, but you think it now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's deep stuff.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it was.
Now, that may be a good segue into the dark stuff that you mentioned before. So,
Yeah.
what does that entail? What is this dark part of matrimony?
Well, does anybody know any reason why this should not proceed? Speak now. Okay. Have you ever been to a wedding where you sat there, you sized up the people at the front of the room who were actually saying the I do's, and you thought to yourself, this doesn't look good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Not going to mention any names, but I know what you're saying.
It happens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. And we just let it slide, don't we?
Yeah.
You know we do. And why is that? Because that's not what you're invited for.
Mm.
You're not invited there to weigh in on the advisability of what's going on. You're not there in any way to influence what's going on. You're there like a Greek chorus is there to laugh on cue, to clap on cue, to amen on cue if it comes to that. That's it. Nothing's left to you. That's dark. It doesn't look dark. It looks like nothing. It looks like something nobody would notice. But as soon as I point it out to you, you can feel, can you not, some kind of dereliction of duty.
Mm.
But you're a grown-up man, goddammit, and you just let it go. And it doesn't mean you were right about the two people at the front of the room necessarily, but it does mean that if this is a village event, then the village needs to have its place and have its voice heard for the sake of these two people, if for no other reason. That's the begin. Sorry, I got a moth here. There we go. That begins to give you a feel for a sort of rolling kind of regret from one half-assed ceremony to the next as we make it through the middle years of our lives as kind of generic North Americans. You just kind of watch the pageant go by and you wonder why you feel insignificant. You don't feel called upon. You don't feel vital to the proceedings. Well, there's a reason for that. You're not. You're not needed. And that's the darkness I'm talking about. It manifests in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
But the only challenge you can bring to that for real in a moment like that that's swayed so much in that direction is to proceed as if you're needed. And then you got to ask yourself, what would the translation of that understanding be in this moment? So I'll give you an example of a woman who stood and delivered. And it was remarkable. I'll never forget it. So the groom in this case was around early 30s, mid 30s, maybe mid 30s. So translation, he'd been around for a while, no? And one of the guests was his ex-girlfriend. Now, not a lot of exes show up at weddings.
Yeah.
Which is too bad. Because they have what you'd imagine is a kind of unique perspective. Maybe not a welcome one. Probably some authenticity in there somewhere, if there's not a terrible amount of hard feelings and bad blood and all the rest of it. Well, somebody invited her. So her turn came around to speak, and she stood up, and she didn't speak to the people, to the congregation. She didn't even speak to the other side, across the aisle, so to speak. She spoke right to him.
Wow.
She said, listen, you know who I am, but I know you better. I know what you're like with women. I've been there with you. And I'm here to say, and then she began to elaborate the obligations he had to the woman he was preparing to marry that day. And as she was doing that, his mother, you could feel her spine stiffen, and you could feel the anxiety and the anger and the rage that was beginning to fester and go molten in her. So what's all that? Is it uncalled for? I don't think so. We could use a lot more of ex-spouses and ex-partners, with the anger leached out, okay? I'm not talking about payback. I'm talking about testimony. We could use the presence of us not in our best moments attested to there too, couldn't we? Just for a little ballast, just for a little authentic, real, personal presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's very bold to invite an ex to a wedding.
It's stones. It's, somebody's got stones to do that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Wow. All I know is when I get married, I want you to officiate it, Stephen.
Dude, I'm sorry to say this, but you don't have enough money to get me back in the ring.
Oh, yeah, you're out of the game?
Oh, I've been out of the game for a while, yeah.
Oh.
No, the book is a love letter to having tried.
Okay. I respect that.
Of course, I don't hold anything back. So, for everything I'm telling you now, there's 15 or 20 of these kinds of things that make the book useful. I think principally that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not only am I telling you, what doesn't work and why it seems broken and the ghostly shape of, what used to be and all. Not only that, but then I tell you what I try to do in response to it. I don't leave you hanging. I don't say, it sucks, good luck. I mean, that's not it at all. So as you can probably tell, I have some pride about the labor that I put into doing this. And there's not actually that many witnesses, and there's no transcripts, and there's fleeting memories. As time goes by, they become, inaccurate and flawed and so on like that. So I did everything I could to remember these things as authentically as I could, bring them back to myself whilst they were still recountable. And that's what the book became.
Amazing. Well, Stephen, that might be a good note to wrap this up at, to be honest. I mean, I know I could talk to you on and on, but I feel like we came full circle with that. I think that's a good note to, I don't know, put a bow on this whole thing. But
sure.
Do you have anything else that you want to say before we stop recording?
Well, everything I said so far, I wanted to say. So, and I'm pleased for the opportunity to remember this stuff aloud. And I mean, I would just leave people who are listening with the following thought. I'm almost 71 years old. I haven't seen everything. I haven't even seen most things, but I've seen some stuff. And the stuff I've seen, I have a pretty good memory for. I didn't blink most of the time when I had the chance to see the real thing in front of me or the absence of the real thing in front of me. People are up against, people your age and younger. They're up against a serious, damning sequence of unlikelihoods in the near future. Let's be honest. I mean, that's all true. And there can be, and it would be understandable if there is, all kinds of pessimism, defeatism, fatalism,
Nihilism.
Depression, thank you, nihilism, yeah. All kinds of sarcasm, all kinds of irony, and we could just go on. And all that stuff's in the room, it's in the air, it's on Main Street, it's on this machine, infernal machine, over and over and over again. I, with this conversation and with this book, am not adding to it. With this book, I'm making a serious throwdown. And I'm saying, listen, it's not good, right? Right. Okay. Once we get a pretty good handle on what's not good, what then? Is that where you stop? Or do you realize if you got an opportunity and they didn't throw you in jail for doing it, to try to figure out what's not working, what kind of responsibility do you think that puts on your shoulders? So this book is me answering the question what my responsibility was. And I'm happy to spread it around a bit and leave people with the understanding something can be done. Listen, nobody asked me to do any of the stuff I described to you. Nobody did. They still don't. So I did it. The impulse to do it did not come from the request or the invitation. It came from the kind of sorrowed and deeply realized understanding that, man, it hasn't always been like this. We haven't always been this unable. And maybe we're not nearly as unable as we think. But it takes some real jam to stand up when you're not called upon and say, I'd just like to make sure, for the sake of the record, that this gets said too. And take a chance and do that. It's not egotism. It's village mindedness. And that's the advocacy. The village mind is a beautiful antidote to the poverty that we've been talking about.
Beautiful.
Amen.
Stephen Jenkinson, thank you very much for joining me today. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you too. It's one of the first times I've talked about the book. I'm really pleased.
I'm pleased as well. It's been an honor. Keep up the good work. I wish you all the best, and let's definitely tap in again in the future. I love talking to you. I don't know anybody else that has a better command of the English language than you, Stephen. I'm not trying to pump you up too much here, but I mean that. You're a poet. Every sentence is a poem, it seems, and it's amazing. I love listening to you. So yes, keep up the good work, Stephen. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. You keep up yours too.
Thank you. Peace and love, everybody. Bye.